A man is standing outside a door he said he would never come back. Rain is falling on him. His hand is up, ready to knock. But he can't move. 3 weeks ago, Kai looked Rin in the eyes and said, "I'll never mark an omega like you." It was cold. It was final. It hurt. But tonight, Kai is standing in the rain outside Rin's door. His heart is beating fast because he just found out something big. Something that changes everything. And when that door opens, nothing will be the same again. Stay with me till the end. You will understand why pride can cost a man everything he loves. Before we start, if you love stories like this, please hit subscribe. It helps this channel grow a lot. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Okay, let's begin. The elevator doors slid open on the 40th floor at exactly 7 in the morning, and Rin Ashford stepped out with 2 coffee cups balanced in one hand and a folder tucked under his arm. He didn't need to check his watch. He already knew he was 3 minutes early. He was always 3 minutes early. The office was empty except for the cleaning lady humming near the window, and the soft click of Rin's shoes on the marble floor was the only other sound. He walked past rows of dark computer screens, past the glass wall that looked out over the city, and stopped in front of a door with no name plate on it. He didn't need a name plate. Everyone in the building knew whose office it was. He knocked twice, then pushed the door open without waiting for an answer. Kai Solare was already at his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a pen spinning between 2 fingers while his eyes moved fast across a document. He didn't look up. "Late," Kai said. Rin set 1 coffee cup down on the desk, right where Kai always liked it, 2 inches from the edge of his laptop. "It's 6:57, exactly. Late." Rin didn't argue. He never argued. He just placed the folder down next to the coffee and stepped back, hands folded in front of him, waiting. Kai finally looked up. His eyes moved from the folder to Rin's face, and for a second, just a second, something in his expression softened. Then it was gone, replaced by the same flat, unreadable look he wore for board meetings and press conferences and everything in between. "Hendrik contract," Kai said, tapping the folder. "Did you flag the clause on page? Did. 3rd paragraph. They tried to slip in a termination fee that favors them, not us." Kai opened the folder, scanned the page, and a corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, something close to it. "Good catch." That was as close to a compliment as Kai Solare gave anyone. Rin had learned over 2 years to hear the whole sentence in those 2 words. By 8, the office had filled up. Phones ringing. People walking fast with tablets pressed to their chests. Somewhere down the hall, someone was arguing about a shipment that got held up at customs. None of it touched Kai's office. Inside those glass walls, it was just Kai, his desk, and Rin standing a few feet away, always ready, always watching for the smallest thing that might need fixing before it became a problem. At 9, Kai had a meeting with 3 men in dark suits who Rin didn't like. He never said this out loud, but he noticed things. The way one of them kept glancing at the exits. The way another one's smile never touched his eyes. When the meeting ended and the men walked out, Kai leaned back in his chair and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You didn't like them," Kai said. "It wasn't a question. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to." Kai's eyes were on him now, steady, studying. "You get this look. Right here." He tapped just below his own eye, "like you're cataloging every lie in the room." Felt his face go warm and looked down at the folder in his hands instead of at Kai. "Maybe I am. You're usually right." That was another thing Rin had learned. Kai Solare did not hand out trust easily. He'd built his entire world on the belief that people always wanted something, that softness got you killed in this business, literally or otherwise. And yet here Rin was, 2 years in, and somehow he'd ended up being the one person Kai let stand close enough to see the cracks. Nobody else got that. The other assistants who had come before Rin didn't last long. Some quit after a month, worn down by Kai's coldness. One had been let go for talking to a reporter. Rin had simply stayed, quiet, steady, never once asking Kai for anything more than what the job required. But somewhere in those 2 years, something had started to shift, slow and quiet, like a tide coming in without anyone noticing the water rising. It showed in small ways. Kai remembering that Rin didn't take sugar in his coffee without ever being told twice. Kai staying late some nights not because there was work to do, but because Rin was still there, finishing something, and Kai didn't leave until Rin did. Once, during a thunderstorm, Kai had draped his own jacket over Rin's shoulders without a word, then acted like it never happened. Rin noticed all of it. He just never said anything because saying something meant risking everything. At lunch, Rin sat at his small desk outside Kai's office and ate a sandwich he'd packed that morning. Across the open floor, two other assistants were talking, heads bent close together. "He's impossible," one of them said, meaning Kai, not lowering her voice much. "I don't know how Rin does it. I heard he threw a phone at someone last year. I believe it." Kept his eyes on his sandwich and said nothing. He could have told them that Kai wasn't like that, not really, not underneath. He could have told them about the mornings Kai asked, quiet and almost shy, if Rin had eaten breakfast. He could have told them 100 small things that painted a different picture. But those things were his. He didn't want to hand them out to people who only saw the surface. The office door opened and Kai stepped out, scanning the floor until his eyes landed on Rin. "Conference room. Now, Hendrik wants to renegotiate," was already standing, folder in hand, coffee cup left behind. As they walked side by side down the hall, Kai's voice dropped low enough that only Rin could hear it. "If he tries to push that termination clause again, don't wait for my signal, cut him off. Understood? You're better at reading him than I am." Rin glanced sideways at him. "You're better at scaring him." For a second, just a flicker, Kai almost smiled. A real one. It vanished as fast as it came, but Rin saw it, and something in his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the meeting ahead. The negotiation lasted 2 hours. Hendrik tried 3 different ways to slide the fee back into the contract, and each time, Rin caught it before Kai even had to raise his voice. By the end, Hendrik left looking smaller than when he walked in, and Kai looked, for the first time all day, satisfied. Back in the office, the sun had started sliding down behind the city skyline, painting the glass walls orange. Kai sat on the edge of his desk instead of his chair, tie loosened, watching Rin gather papers into a neat stack. "You didn't have to stay this late," Kai said. "Neither did you." Kai didn't answer that. He just watched Rin move around the room, the way he always straightened things without being asked, the way his hands were careful with everything he touched. Rin looked up. "Yeah." Kai opened his mouth like he wanted to say something real. His eyes held Rin's for 3 full seconds, long enough that Rin's heart started beating a little faster, long enough that the air in the room felt different, thinner somehow. Then Kai's jaw tightened. Whatever he'd been about to say, he swallowed it back down. "Nothing," he said. "Go home, early morning tomorrow." Rin nodded, even though something in his chest sank a little. He grabbed his coat off the back of his chair and walked to the door. He paused there, hand on the frame, and looked back one more time. Kai was still sitting on the edge of his desk, watching him, his expression unreadable again, walls back up. But his hands, resting on his knees, were curled into fists, like he was holding himself back from something. "Good night, Kai," Rin said softly. Kai answered, voice rougher than usual. Rin left. The door clicked shut behind him, and in the empty office, alone now, Kai Solare sat very still for a long time, staring at the spot where Rin had just been standing, his jaw tight, his fists still clenched, like a man fighting a war nobody else could see. Neither of them said what they were feeling. Neither of them had, not once in 2 whole years. But something was building underneath all that silence. Something that had been building for a long time. And soon, very soon, it was going to break. 3 days after that quiet evening in the office, everything changed. It started with a phone call. Rin was at his desk when Kai's private line lit up, the one only family used. Kai picked it up, listened for a moment, and his face went pale. Then he stood so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. "I'm on my way," he said, and hung up before the other person finished talking. "What's wrong?" Rin asked, already grabbing Kai's coat off the hook. "My father," Kai said. "He collapsed. They're taking him to the hospital." Rin didn't ask another question. He just followed Kai out the door, down the elevator, into the car waiting outside. The whole ride, Kai stared out the window, jaw tight, hands gripping his knees. Rin sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, close enough to feel the tension coming off Kai like heat off a stove. At the hospital, doctors moved fast, and Kai moved faster, demanding answers nobody had yet. Rin stayed a step behind him the whole time, handing him water he didn't drink, holding his coat when he threw it off, standing quiet in the corner of the waiting room while Kai paced. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor came out and said Kai's father was stable. It had been his heart, but he would live. Kai sat down hard in a plastic chair like his legs had given out, and for the first time that day, he let his shoulders drop. Rin sat beside him and didn't say anything. He just stayed there, present, solid, the way he always was. It was near midnight when Kai's father was finally allowed visitors, one at a time. Kai went in first. Rin waited outside the door, arms crossed, watching nurses move down the hallway. When Kai came out 20 minutes later, his face looked different, not relieved, something closer to shaken. "What happened?" Rin asked, standing up straight. Kai didn't answer right away. He walked past Rin down the hall toward the window at the end where the city lights spread out below them. Rin followed. "He wants me to get bonded," Kai said finally, staring out at the lights. "Says he almost died and he wants to see me settled before he goes. Says the company needs an heir with a proper bond behind him. Investors trust family men, stability, all of that." Rin's stomach dropped, though he kept his face still. "Okay. Already has someone in mind." Kai's voice was flat now, careful. "Some Omega from an old business family, good bloodline, good connections, the kind of match that looks right on paper." Felt something twist inside his chest, but he swallowed it down. When does he want this to happen? Soon, before the shareholders' meeting next month. Kai finally turned to look at him. "He wants an announcement." Nodded slowly, even though nothing about this felt like something he could nod at. "That's a lot to ask of you, after everything today." Kai looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he looked away again, back out the window. "It's fine. It's just business." But his voice didn't sound fine. It sounded like a man convincing himself of something he didn't believe. They didn't talk much on the ride home. Kai dropped Rin off first, insisting even though Rin said he could take a cab. Standing on the sidewalk outside his apartment building, Rin watched Kai's car pull away into the night, and something heavy settled into his chest that he didn't have a name for yet. The next morning, the office felt different. Kai was quieter than usual, sharper with everyone except Rin, snapping at emails, canceling 2 meetings without explanation. Around noon, his father's assistant called to confirm a dinner. Kai took the call in his office with the door shut, and when he came out his face was unreadable again, the walls fully back up. "Dinner tonight," Kai said, not looking at Rin. "My father wants me to meet the Omega he picked out, some kind of formal introduction. Do you want me to clear your schedule?" "Yes." A pause. "And Rin?" "Yes. I need you there, taking notes, making sure everything runs smooth." He finally looked up, and something in his eyes looked almost like an apology, though for what Rin couldn't say. "It's just business." Nodded again, even though every word felt like swallowing glass. "Of course." Restaurant that night was the kind of place with white tablecloths and candles and a view of the whole city glittering below. Kai's father sat at the head of the table, looking tired but proud, and across from Kai sat an Omega named Julian, polished and beautiful in a way that seemed built for photographs. Julian smiled a lot, laughed at the right moments, touched Kai's arm twice during dinner in a way that made something ugly twist in Rin's stomach. Rin sat off to the side with a small notebook, exactly where an assistant should sit. Invisible, useful, watching everything. He watched the way Kai answered Julian's questions politely, correctly, like a man reading lines from a script. He watched the way Kai's eyes drifted, more than once, toward the corner where Rin sat, quick glances that lasted half a second before snapping back to the table. He watched Kai's father lean over at one point and whisper something to Kai that made Kai's jaw tighten, though his face stayed calm for everyone else. By the time dessert came, Rin had stopped tasting anything. He just kept writing in his notebook, notes that didn't matter, just to keep his hands busy, just to keep from looking up too much. Julian excused himself to the restroom at one point, and Kai's father followed shortly after to take a call. For a moment it was just Kai and Rin, the table half empty, candles flickering between them. "Quiet tonight," Kai said, voice low. "I'm working," Rin said, not looking up from his notebook. "Rin." Something in the way Kai said his name made Rin finally look up. Kai was watching him with an expression Rin had never seen on him before, something open, something almost desperate. "This doesn't mean anything," Kai said quietly. "This dinner, any of it." "You don't have to explain yourself to me," Rin said, keeping his voice steady even though his hands weren't. I'm just your assistant." The word hung in the air between them, heavier than Rin meant it to sound. Kai's expression shifted, something flickering across his face too fast to read. Before he could say anything else, Julian returned to the table, laughing about something with Kai's father who had come back at the same time, and the moment closed like a door. The rest of dinner passed in careful, polite conversation. Rin wrote everything down. Kai answered everything correctly. And underneath the table, out of sight, Kai's hand curled into a fist against his own knee, the same way it had that night in the office, like he was fighting something nobody else could see. Later, walking Rin to his car in the parking garage, Kai stopped a few feet from the driver's door. The garage was empty, quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights above them. "Rin," Kai said. Rin turned around. "Yes." Kai stood there for a long moment saying nothing, just looking at him with that same open, desperate expression from dinner. Rin's heart pounded so loud he was sure Kai could hear it. "Nothing," Kai finally said, jaw tightening again, walls slamming back up. "Get home safe." Nodded, throat tight, and got into his car. He watched Kai in the rearview mirror as he drove away, standing alone in the empty garage, hands shoved into his pockets, staring after the car long after it turned the corner. Neither of them said the thing that mattered most. Neither of them ever did. But 3 days later, everything Kai had tried to hold back finally broke loose, in the worst way possible, in front of the one person he should never have said it to. 3 days after the dinner, Kai barely spoke to Rin at all. He came into the office early, left late, and filled every hour in between with meetings that didn't need to be that long. When Rin brought him coffee, Kai said thank you without looking up. When Rin flagged something in a contract, Kai just nodded and moved on. The easy rhythm they'd built over 2 years, the small jokes, the quiet glances, all of it had gone cold, like someone had shut a door somewhere and locked it. Rin told himself it didn't matter. He told himself a lot of things that week that weren't true. On Thursday, Kai's father called again, this time with news that made Kai's face turn to stone. Julian's family wanted to move faster. They wanted the bond announced within 2 weeks, not waiting for the shareholders' meeting. Kai's father agreed before Kai even had a chance to speak. Kai hung up the phone and sat very still for a long moment. Rin stood in the doorway watching, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say that would help. "Weeks," Kai said finally, like the words tasted bad in his mouth. "I heard," Rin said quietly. Kai looked up at him then, and something raw crossed his face before he could stop it. For a second, Rin thought he might say something real, but then Kai's jaw tightened and he stood up, grabbing his jacket off the chair. "I need air," he said, and walked out without another word. Rin stayed behind, staring at the empty chair, feeling something inside him crack a little more. That night, Rin couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the restaurant, the way Kai's hand had curled into a fist under the table, the way he'd said this doesn't mean anything, like he was trying to convince himself as much as Rin. He kept thinking about 2 years of small moments that had felt like something, and wondering if he'd built a whole story in his head out of nothing at all. The next morning he came into the office earlier than usual, and found Kai already there, sitting on the couch in the corner instead of behind his desk, staring at nothing. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Early," Kai said, not looking up. "So are you." Kai didn't answer. Rin set his coffee down on the small table beside the couch and sat down on the other end, close but not too close, the way he'd learned to measure distance around Kai over 2 years. "Can I ask you something?" Rin said. Kai's eyes flicked to him, wary. "Depends what it is." "Do you want this, the bond with Julian?" The question hung in the air. Kai looked away, back toward the window, jaw working like he was chewing on an answer he didn't like. "It doesn't matter what I want," Kai said finally. "It's what the company needs, what my father needs. He almost died, Rin. I'm not going to argue with a dying man's last wish." "He's not dying. The doctor said he's stable. Now." Kai's voice was sharp, sharper than he probably meant it to be. "You don't understand what it's like. Everyone waiting for you to fail. Everyone watching to see if you're strong enough to hold this whole thing together. A bond like this, it's not about feelings, it's about survival." Rin sat with that for a moment, something cold settling in his chest. "So feelings don't matter to you at all?" Kai turned to look at him, and for a second his whole face changed, something breaking open behind his eyes. "That's not what I said. It's what it sounded like. Rin, forget it. Rin stood up fast, grabbing his coffee, needing to move, needing to put space between himself and whatever was about to spill out of both of them. You have a call with the Hendrik people in 20 minutes. I'll get the file ready. He walked out before Kai could say anything else, and behind him he heard Kai exhale hard, like a man who just missed catching something falling out of his own hands. The days that followed moved fast and slow at the same time. The bond announcement date crept closer. Julian started coming by the office more often, always polished, always smiling, always finding some reason to touch Kai's arm or lean close and whisper something that made Kai's face carefully blank. Rin watched all of it from his desk outside the office, taking notes on things that didn't matter, keeping his hands busy so they wouldn't shake. Then, 6 days before the announcement, everything cracked wide open. It happened on a Tuesday. Rin came in with the morning reports and found Julian already in Kai's office, door shut, voices raised just enough to carry through the glass. Rin slowed his steps close enough to hear without meaning to. Don't understand why he's always in every meeting, Julian was saying, voice tight. Your assistant. He's in the car with us, he's at dinner, he's practically glued to your side. People are starting to talk, Kai. Does his job, that's all this is. Julian's voice dropped lower, harder to hear, because it doesn't look like nothing from where I'm standing. There was a pause, a long one. Rin's heart pounded so loud he was sure it would give him a way through the glass. Is my assistant, Kai said, each word slow and careful. Nothing more, I've told you that. Then prove it, Julian said. Get a new assistant before the announcement. Someone who isn't, a pause, sharp, cutting, someone who isn't an omega hanging around you like a shadow. It doesn't look right for the man I'm about to bond with. Didn't hear what Kai said next, because he stepped back from the door, quiet, careful, and walked to his desk with his heart hammering against his ribs. He sat down and stared at his computer screen without seeing anything on it. 20 minutes later, Kai's office door opened. Julian walked out first, throwing Rin a look that was polite on the surface and cold underneath, then disappeared into the elevator. A moment later, Kai stepped out, and his face looked like a man who just lost an argument he didn't want to have in the first place. Rin, he said, my office. Followed him in, and Kai shut the door behind them. For a long moment, Kai just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like he couldn't find the words. I heard, Rin said quietly, saving him the trouble. Some of it anyway. Kai's head came up fast. Rin, it's fine, Rin said, even though nothing about it felt fine. You're bonding with him. Of course he doesn't want another omega around all the time. It makes sense. Doesn't make sense to me. The words came out harder than Kai probably meant them, sharp with something that sounded almost like anger, though not at Rin. None of this makes sense to me. Then why are you doing it? Kai didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, hands pressed flat against the glass, staring out at the city below like it held some answer he couldn't find anywhere else. Because I don't have a choice, he said finally, voice low. Because if I don't do this, my father's legacy falls apart, the company falls apart, everything he built falls apart. I can't be the reason for that. What about what falls apart for you? Kai turned around slowly. His eyes met Rin's, and for the first time in days the walls were gone completely, nothing hidden, nothing careful. He looked for just a moment like a man drowning. Rin, he said, voice barely above a whisper. If I start saying what I actually want, I don't think I'll be able to stop. Air in the room went very still. Rin's breath caught in his throat. For one long, suspended second, it felt like something might finally break through, like 2 years of careful distance might collapse into something real. Then Kai's phone rang. He looked at it, jaw tightening, and the walls slammed back up so fast it was like watching a door shut in someone's face. He answered the call, voice suddenly flat and businesslike, turning away from Rin toward the window again. Rin stood there a moment longer, chest aching, then quietly let himself out. That night, working late in the empty office, Rin found something he wasn't looking for. A folder left open on Kai's desk, papers spread across it, bond paperwork, legal documents, and near the bottom, a note in Kai's father's handwriting, blunt and cold. If Kai does not bond by the announcement date, the board will vote him out. Julian's family has already been promised the position in his place if this falls through. Rin's hands went cold holding the paper. This wasn't just about a dying father's wish. This was about survival, exactly like Kai had said. If Kai didn't bond with Julian, he would lose everything he'd spent his whole life building. Rin set the paper down exactly where he'd found it, and sat there for a long time in the empty office, understanding for the first time just how impossible Kai's choice really was, and understanding, with a cold and heavy certainty, what that meant for whatever had been quietly growing between them. 2 days later, everything came crashing down in front of the entire office, in a moment neither of them could take back. The office was full when it happened. Every desk on the floor, every meeting room, everyone stopped what they were doing the second Kai's voice cut through the air. It started small. Rin walked into Kai's office with the final bond paperwork, the papers Julian's family had sent over that morning, needing only Kai's signature to make everything official. 2 days before the announcement, everything moving exactly the way it was supposed to. Except Julian was already there, standing in the middle of the office, arms crossed, voice tight with frustration. "I'm not asking you to fire him," Julian was saying as Rin stepped through the door. "I'm asking you to move him somewhere else, another department, anywhere that isn't glued to your side every hour of the day." "Julian, people are talking, Kai." Julian's eyes cut toward Rin the moment he noticed him standing in the doorway, papers in hand. "Speak of the devil." Froze in the doorway, papers pressed against his chest. "I can come back," Kai said, voice tired, rubbing a hand over his face. "Stay. This concerns you too, apparently." Julian turned fully toward Rin now, something cold and sharp in his expression. "I don't have a problem with you personally. I just think it's strange, don't you? An Omega assistant who never leaves his boss's side. 2 years and you've never once asked for a promotion, never once asked for anything. What exactly are you waiting for?" The words landed like a slap. Rin felt his face go hot, felt every eye in the outer office turn toward Kai's glass walls, watching, waiting. "That's enough," Kai said, low and warning. "Is it?" Julian pressed. "Because I think everyone in this building already knows what this actually is. I think you know too. I think that's exactly why you can't make yourself sign that paperwork." Kai's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked just for a second to Rin standing frozen in the doorway, and something in that glance gave away more than he probably meant it to. Julian caught it. Everyone caught it. "There it is," Julian said quietly, almost sad now instead of angry. "That's the look you've never once given me." Office had gone completely silent. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. Rin stood there, papers shaking slightly in his hands, wanting the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "Kai," Rin said quietly, voice barely steady. "I should go." Kai's voice came out rougher than he meant it to, and he seemed to hear it himself, seemed to hear how much it gave away because his whole body went rigid a second later. Julian let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is exactly what I mean. There is nothing between us," Kai said, too loud, too fast, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. He turned toward Rin, and something in his eyes looked almost panicked, cornered, like an animal backed into a wall with no way out. "Tell him, Rin, tell him there's nothing here." Rin's chest ached so badly he could barely breathe. "Kai, tell him," Kai said again, sharper this time, desperate underneath the sharpness. The whole office was watching now. Rin could feel every eye on him, feel the weight of 2 years pressing down on this single moment, feel his own heart breaking quietly in the middle of a room full of strangers. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. His silence said everything Kai was trying so hard to deny, and that silence broke something in Kai. "Never mark an Omega like you," Kai barked, the words exploding out of him, loud enough that people 2 desks away flinched. His eyes were on Rin now, wild, furious, though not really at Rin at all, furious at himself, furious at the impossible corner he'd been backed into. "Do you understand me? Whatever you think this is, whatever you've been imagining for 2 years, it's nothing. It was never going to be anything. I have a company to run, a father who almost died, a family name that doesn't survive on feelings. I am bonding with Julian in 2 days, and nothing is going to change that." Words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Rin stood perfectly still, papers slipping slightly in his grip, his face draining of color. For a moment nobody in the office moved. Julian looked almost satisfied, arms still crossed, like he'd finally gotten the answer he came for. Kai stood there breathing hard, chest rising and falling, already looking like he wanted to take the words back and knowing he couldn't. Rin set the paperwork down on the nearest desk, very carefully, very quietly. "Understood," he said. His voice came out steady, which surprised even him, considering how badly his hands were shaking. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk by the end of the day." Kai's voice cracked, all the anger draining out of it in an instant, replaced by something close to horror at what he'd just done. "You made yourself very clear," Rin said, and turned and walked out of the office, past every desk, past every pair of eyes that had just watched 2 years of his life collapse in under a minute, into the elevator, and did not look back once. Kai didn't move for a long moment. Julian said something to him, but Kai didn't hear a word of it. He was staring at the empty doorway where Rin had just been standing, his hands curled into fists at his sides, his whole body shaking with something that felt too big to hold inside his own chest. "Kai." Julian's voice, distant, irritated. "Kai, are you even listening to me?" "Get out," Kai said quietly. "Excuse me, get out of my office." Kai's voice rose, sharp and final. "The bond is off." Julian's mouth fell open. "What? You heard me." Kai turned to face him now, something cold and clear in his eyes that hadn't been there a moment before, like a fog had suddenly lifted. "I'm not bonding with you. I never should have agreed to this in the first place." "You'll lose everything," Julian snapped. "The board, the company, your father's legacy." "Then I'll lose it," Kai said. "But I'm not spending the rest of my life bonded to someone I don't love. While the one person I actually do love walks out of my life because I was too much of a coward to say so." Julian stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head and walked out without another word, heels sharp against the floor, leaving Kai alone in the middle of his own office, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he'd just torn down in under 5 minutes. Kai sank into his chair, dropped his head into his hands, and sat there for a long time, replaying the look on Rin's face right before he walked out. Not anger, something worse. Something quiet and broken that Kai knew he had put there himself. By the end of the day, exactly like he'd promised, a resignation letter appeared on Kai's desk. Kai read it twice, then a third time, and each time the words blurred harder because his eyes wouldn't stop stinging. He called Rin's phone. No answer. He called again. Nothing. He sent a message that just said please, and watched the screen for an hour and got nothing back. He found out from HR that Rin had already cleared out his desk. 2 years of a life, packed into a single box, gone before the sun even went down. Kai sat alone in his office long after everyone else had left, staring at the empty chair outside his door where Rin used to sit every single morning, 3 minutes early, coffee balanced in one hand. The office had never felt so big or so silent or so completely, unbearably empty. He thought about his father's company. He thought about the board, the shareholders, everything he'd spent his whole life protecting. And for the first time, none of it mattered at all compared to the hollow ache spreading through his chest. 3 weeks passed. Kai barely ate, barely slept. He fired Julian's family from every remaining contract out of pure stubborn anger. Let the board scream at him in meeting after meeting. Let his father look at him with disappointed silence. And none of it touched him the way one empty chair outside his office touched him every single morning. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, Kai stood outside an apartment building he'd only been to once before, staring up at a window with a light on in it, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. He climbed the stairs. He raised his hand. And for the first time in his entire life, Kai Solare, a man who never begged for anything, got down on his knees outside a door he wasn't sure would ever open for him again and knocked. Rin heard the knock and almost didn't answer it. He was sitting on his couch with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, a cold cup of tea on the table beside him, the television on but muted, playing to nobody. 3 weeks of silence had settled into his apartment like dust, and he'd stopped expecting anything to break it. The knock came again. Softer this time, almost hesitant, Rin stood, pulled the blanket tighter around himself and walked to the door. He looked through the peephole and his whole body went still. Kai was outside. Soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead, suit dark with rain, kneeling on the ground with one hand pressed flat against the door like he needed it to hold himself up. Rin stood there for a long moment, hand on the doorknob, heart pounding so loud he could hear it in his own ears. Part of him wanted to walk away, go back to the couch, let the silence stay unbroken. But another part of him, the part that had spent 2 years learning every small piece of this man, couldn't make his feet move away from the door. He opened it. Kai looked up at him from the ground, rain dripping down his face, mixing with something that might have been tears or might have just been the storm. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "Going to get sick," Rin finally said, voice quieter than he meant it to be. "I don't care." Kai's voice came out rough, cracked in places Rin had never heard before. "I've been standing outside for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to say, and I still don't have the right words, but I couldn't leave without saying something." Crossed his arms, holding himself together. "You already said what you needed to say, in front of the whole office. I remember it pretty clearly." Kai flinched like he'd been struck. I know what I said, and I have thought about nothing else for 3 weeks straight." "Then why are you here?" Kai pushed himself up off the ground slowly, standing now, rain still falling around him, close enough that Rin could see every raw, unguarded piece of his face. This wasn't the Kai from the office. This wasn't the man who kept his walls up during board meetings and press conferences. This was someone Rin had only seen in small flashes, late at night, in quiet moments neither of them ever spoke about. "Because I lied," Kai said. "That day. Every word of it was a lie, and I said it because I was scared, and because I didn't know how to be the man my father needed and the man I actually wanted to be at the same time. So I picked the easy thing. I picked the thing that didn't require me to admit anything." Rin's chest ached, but he stayed where he was, arms still crossed, not ready to let his guard down that easily. "You ended things with Julian 3 weeks ago, right after you walked out." Kai took a small step closer, rain running down his jaw. "I haven't been able to eat properly since. I haven't slept in my own bed because it feels too big and too quiet. I sit in my office every morning and stare at an empty chair that used to have you in it, 3 minutes early, coffee in your hand, and I have never in my life felt as alone as I have these past 3 weeks." "You made your choice," Rin said, though his voice wasn't as steady as before. "In front of everyone. I know. And I am asking you right now, standing in the rain like an idiot, to let me make a different one." Rin's eyes stung, and he blinked hard, refusing to let it show. "What different one?" Kai reached into his jacket, hands shaking slightly from the cold or from nerves. Rin couldn't tell which, and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, soaked at the edges. He held it out. "I resigned my father's business demands," Kai said. "I told the board I would not be bonding with anyone chosen for me. I told them if they wanted to vote me out over it, they could go ahead and try. My father was furious, still is probably, but none of that mattered to me the way you mattered to me." Took the paper carefully, unfolding it despite the rain soaking further into it. It was a short letter, written in Kai's own handwriting, messy in a way his usual precise writing never was. It wasn't a business document. It was an apology, a real one. Word after word admitting exactly what Kai had spent 2 years too afraid to say. Rin read it twice, his hands trembling now too, and looked back up at Kai standing there in the rain, waiting, more exposed than Rin had ever seen him. "You barked at me," Rin said quietly. "In front of the whole office. You said I meant nothing." "I know," Kai's voice broke on the words. "And I would take it back 1,000 times over if I could. But I can't. All I can do is stand here and show you, every single day if you let me, that it was never true. Not for 1 second was it true." Looked down at the letter again, then back up at Kai's face, rain still falling steady around them both. Something in his chest, something that had been clenched tight for 3 weeks, finally began to loosen. "Soaked," Rin said again, softer this time. "I know. Inside before you actually get sick." Kai blinked, like he hadn't expected those words, like he'd been ready for the door to close in his face instead. Rin stepped back, holding the door open wider, and Kai walked in slowly, dripping onto the floor, looking around the small apartment like he was seeing something precious for the first time. Rin grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to him without a word. Kai took it, pressed it against his face for a moment, and when he lowered it, his eyes were red, whether from the rain or something else. Rin didn't ask. "Not going to pretend the last 3 weeks didn't happen," Rin said, standing a few feet away, arms still wrapped around himself. "It hurt, really hurt, worse than I want to admit. I know, I'm not asking you to pretend either. Kai set the towel down, taking a careful step closer, close enough now that Rin could feel the warmth radiating off him despite the rain. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I meant every single moment before that day and none of what I said after it. Rin looked up at him, really looked at the exhaustion in his eyes, the rawness that had never once shone through in 2 years of careful distance. Why now? Why not 2 years ago? Because I was scared, Kai admitted, voice quiet and honest in a way Rin had never heard from him. Scared of what it meant to want something that couldn't be controlled, couldn't be managed like a contract. You were never something I could put in a folder and file away, Rin. You were the one thing in my whole life I couldn't predict or protect myself from, and that terrified me more than any board meeting or company crisis ever has. Felt something break loose in his chest, warm and aching all at once. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took Kai's hand, still cold from the rain. An idiot, Rin said, though his voice had gone thick. I know. A complete idiot. I know that too. A small, hopeful smile broke through Kai's exhausted face, the first real one Rin had seen in weeks. Does that mean there's a chance? Rin squeezed his hand gently. It means you have a lot of mornings ahead of you to make up for 3 weeks of silence. Starting with actual coffee, because whatever you've been drinking at that office clearly isn't working. Kai laughed, a real laugh, rough from disuse but genuine, and pulled Rin into his arms without asking permission, holding him close, rain still dripping from his hair onto Rin's shoulder. Rin let himself lean into it, finally, after 2 years of careful distance, after 3 weeks of silence, after one terrible afternoon in front of an entire office. I'm never going to say those words to you again, Kai murmured against his hair. Not ever. Good, Rin said, voice muffled against his soaked shirt. Because if you do, I'm keeping the door locked next time. Kai pulled back just enough to look at him, one hand coming up to gently brush a strand of hair from Rin's face, an easy, tender gesture that carried 2 years of unspoken feeling in it. Fair enough. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and quiet against the window. But inside that small apartment, for the first time in weeks, everything finally felt warm. 6 months later, the company was still standing, stronger than ever, run by a man who had finally learned that strength and softness weren't opposites after all. Kai's father, once furious, came around slowly, watching how steady his son had become, how the company thrived under a leader who finally had someone steady beside him. And every single morning, without fail, Rin walked into that office 3 minutes early, coffee in hand, and Kai was always waiting, no walls left standing between them at all. Lesson from this story, real strength isn't hiding what you feel to protect yourself. It's having the courage to be honest, even when it's terrifying, before you lose the people who matter most. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what we bring you next. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next story.